Thank you. I want you to think back, excuse me. I want you to think back to the last time that you stood in line to get a cup of coffee, to get lunch, and what did you do? So I'm going to try and peer through these lights and see hands. How many people, come forward, how many people talked to someone else that they didn't know? Okay, good. How many people daydreamed? Just let their mind wander. Okay. And how many people looked at their phone? Okay, so many. I want to tell you what happened in your brain with each of those choices, because they are choices. When you daydream, when you talk to people, what happens is you get lots of different neurochemicals. Eye gaze means you get spindle neurons, mirror neurons going off, you get oxytocin, you get dopamine, and if it's funny, you get endorphins, and you get dynamic resonance of moving with that other person. So you've got an awful lot going on, and a lot of those chemicals make you feel nice and happy and positive, so you connect. If you daydream, it's quite interesting, because what happens when you daydream is we always force our brains to task, and we don't let them do things like connecting the way that it knows that it should very often. When you daydream, you go into something called abstraction, and that means that almost the neurons can loosen off and sort of trot around and reconnect in ways that your brain's very good at, only we stop it because we block it all the time when we either play games on the phone or we go to task all the time. When you pick up the phone, that's it, you tend to go to task. So one of the things I want you to think about is that we make choices all the time that shape our brains. And what that means about how you interact with people is that you're also shaping their brains very often if you do interact with them. So what does that mean in terms of people connecting with each other in all sorts of different ways? So we have something called interpersonal neural synchronization. It sounds very technical, but what it means is that your brain actually neurophysiologically connects, it synchronizes. So you know how if you're being told a story by someone who's really good at that, who really connects with you, and they're warm, and you can see it in your own heads, and they're good at making you feel positive, what happens is, if I was to scan both brains, both of the synchronized areas would be really wildly firing. And it's why with some people, you really get that vision in your heads and you feel it in your hearts. But with other people, that doesn't happen. And we're able to do that by connecting really directly. So what does that mean for the people that you connect with generally? If you think about family, then what that means for things like your children, this is connection, this is really synchronized. Babies are amazing. Right from the start, they not only synchronize their brains, but also their bodies. So if you're holding a child, within about 60 minutes, your cortisol is synchronized. You're helping them to wire up their pleasure centers. There's all sorts of things happening with that baby. So you get a lot of that synchrony going on. This is not synchrony. So what you tend to do with that wonderful computer that we hold in our hands is we get distracted by it. And I think on average now, we look at it about 200 times, and unfortunately, we look more at it when we're at home than we do when we're at work. And there's a lot of evidence coming out now, especially for girls between about 7 and 12, but kids in general. When you're a baby, you can yell at your mum to put the phone down. And when you're a partner, if you're at dinner, then you could say, "Excuse me," if someone's getting a bit distracted, and they will tend to look at you again. But the child in the middle hasn't really got that capability. Excuse me. So what they do instead is they feel every time the person says, just a minute, that what it actually means is you're not so important. And the valuing of themselves, how they feel their self-worth, is dropping because of that consistent lack of really connecting up with that other person. So we need to think about that when we're dealing with them. Teenagers, well, they don't want to talk to you anyway because they're on their phones. But what does that actually mean? I talk a lot to teenagers because we all joke about seeing teenagers all sitting around being on their phones while they're together. And they say, "Oh, you don't get it. That's just the way that we now connect." But they're not getting some things as well. They're not getting the neurochemicals that we've just talked about. And some of those chemicals are really critical to an empathic engagement and connection with other people, that feeling of being part of a whole and being valued. it's even more critical for teenagers because their brains are rewiring wildly when they're teenagers, getting ready for independence. So what has to happen is you're pruning out all of the things to do with connecting to mum and dad, and you're making loads of new connections to peers, which is why it's even more desperate for them to be looking all the time at who's messaging them and who's contacting them. And one of the problems we've got is you get a dopamine spike when you get your message. Actually, when you hear the ding, it doesn't even matter if you read it. And that's pleasurable, but it's very short term, and it's not the same thing physiologically as the chemical release that you get with direct interaction. So again, we're starting to see rising levels of depression, isolation, various things that are connected to that lack of actually chemically being connected to other people. If we go on to older people, I've just done a really interesting study for a year with faculty around the neurophysiological effect of touch and eye gaze on healing. And we do incredible things for each other as human beings when we connect. So I'll tell you a story. I want to just give you one of the little bits, and it's called retinal eye lock, because I think you'll love it. So I'm going to come down and choose you. So if I was your nurse and you were coming in to get an operation, when I meet you, I'm going to look into your eyes, and I'm probably going to touch your skin to take your pulse, which means I'm setting off C fibres, which is another story again. You get loads of extra chemicals. And what happens with our brain is with all of that neural synchrony, we start to get a tiny little nub of each other growing in the other person's brain. Because what the spindle neurons say are, well, you might meet that person again, so I'm going to be ready to have that relationship because it might be a long-term relationship. And that's one of the things that spindle neurons do. So we start to trust each other. So off you go, you have your operation, and you're getting better, and I'm on shift, and so I'll meet you every now and then. And the robot nurse can trot around and give you your lunch and do all of that sort of stuff. But then you get anxious. So you might be in pain, you might be stressed about something. So your physiology changes. Up goes your cortisol, there's all sorts of things that happen in your body. And the amazing thing is, when you see me, we have retinal eye lock. So one of your retinas aligns with one of my retinas. The right hemisphere of your brain synchronizes with the right hemisphere of my brain, and your amygdala phase changes. So I can physiologically calm you down by looking into your eyes because you like me and you trust me. And isn't that incredible? Nothing else does that. No drugs do it. No technology does it. I love technology, but it doesn't do that. And you might have done it with your child or with your partner when they were upset. So that bond creates increases in dopamine, serotonin uptake, you heal faster. There's all sorts of things that happen. So we are really powerful in the way that we can interact with other people. And the same chemicals that we've started making in that interaction, part of the immune system chemicals are ones that can create brand new brains. So even in a workplace, if you go together and you're talking face to face, then that increased capacity and the increase in creativity and nimbleness of your brain is to do with those kind of chemicals that allow your brain to speed up. So in all sorts of relationships, that direct contact is really powerful. One of the things it's doing then is it's creating that empathic response. Now, people think empathy is fluffy, and they think it's just about the feeling of being part of a whole. And don't underestimate that. It's critical to humans, feeling part of someone else and something else. It's really important for our social well-being. But empathy's got a very technical path as well. So when you have a complex problem, what empathy does is it switches you into a mode called discernment. It says we haven't got the information we need, so we need to use a different filter to look for criteria. And the information that it brings to bear on that problem is based on consequences, and it's based on a long lens view. And think about that, it's entirely different than the really short term, what do I want right here, right now? So it changes the way that you think about the problem and the outcomes. And we're seeing short-termism everywhere, decisions in organisations, in governments, in the rise of various things around parts of social media and reality TV. We see it all over the place. So what it does then is it changes the way that you make decisions. But the way that you make decisions changes how you connect, and it becomes a loop. And that can be a virtuous loop, which is you connect and make really positive decisions, or it can be a vicious loop, which means I care even less and I connect even less. So we really need to think about that. The phone is fantastic in lots of ways, but it's built, that little computer, for you to look at it all the time, from when you get up to when you go to bed. But we are built to look into each other's eyes. So I have a little challenge. When you go to work, try and connect as much as you can face to face. You will change the way that the culture works and the way that you ideate lots. When you're at home, be at home. Put that phone off. You're also not in hypervigilance then. It's better for you as well. And from now on, when you stand in that coffee line, I want you not to pick your phone up. Ever. At the very least, if you're not comfortable with talking to someone straight away, then just daydream. And that also leaves the gap for someone else to chat to you. And just think about it. Think about if everyone did these little things and just connected more at those levels, then think about that contagion effect. Think about how much happier and more empathic and more connected and the different decisions we'd make. And we'd be a different group and the world would be a different place. Thank you.